Welcome to the Taming the High Cost of College podcast. Here is your host, certified financial planner, Brad Baldridge.
Welcome to Taming the High Cost of College. Today we're talking with Todd Weaver. He is the president of Strategies for College. Welcome, Todd.
Hello, Brad. Nice to be here.
All right, so Strategies for College. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you guys do there and why families would care?
Happy to do so. Strategies for College, much like the sound of its name, helps families and students become better educated consumers in this crazy world of college planning. And the company has been around since 1990, so last century, helping guide students toward appropriate academic, social, and financial fits for their families. We like to use our three-pillar approach of the money, the academics, and the social fit for the happy student to have a great opportunity for getting in, getting through, getting out of college on time and on budget.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And right, we've both been working with families for a long time. Remember when parents used to come to us and say, oh, they can go to any college they want. We'll figure out how to pay for it. Right?
Yes, it happened last week.
That, right? A lot less families are talking about it that way because, the sticker shock is starting to really sink in. So as you're working with families, I think I want to kind of dive into a concept called merit aid, which is kind of the broad category. But you do a good job of helping families, leverage it. So can you get into, explain a little bit what is merit aid and how can we use that to help pay for college?
Perfect. Yes, great question. There, as you're aware, and I'll tell the audience here too, that there are many different buckets of money that people can use to pay for college. There's the free money, which is merit aid and grant money. And then there's the self-help, which are the loans and the work study. But for merit aid, I think that's one of the key discounting opportunities families can take advantage of. And unfortunately, when they come into this process, they may not be aware of all of the opportunities that are out there. And so I think a big part of my practice and a lot of counselors I have run into, we try to make sure that families are aware, that they're open-minded, that they have a concept of where can I find the merit money, which usually comes when a college wants your student. Where is my student highly valued? That's where I'm going to see the most merit money when it's applicable.
Exactly. So merit money, again, most people think of merit as my student is a academic rock star, therefore the colleges are going to hand them a bunch of scholarships and college will be free and life will be good. Is that the reality of it all?
I suppose there are always outliers, but that's far from reality in my experience. I think that the merit scholarships that are out there can be finite in terms of the amounts that they offer, and each college has a different scale or ability to offer the discounts or merit awards, if you will. And many times that comes from academic success in high school, but it can also come from athletics. It could come from National Merit Scholarship. It could come from geographic items. It could come from, if you're visiting a college far away from home, they might give you more money because of where you live and your zip code. There could be visit opportunities. One of my own sons recently was offered a grant, a scholarship rather, just for coming to visit the campus of $1,000 a year for all 4 years. So it's pretty unique there.
Right, exactly. So merit comes from lots of different reasons. I like to explain it, you've got a college and they need to accept, let's say, 2,000 students for the incoming freshmen. And those 2,000 students need to fill all the various buckets on campus or somebody's going to be unhappy. So they need enough musicians to fill out the marching band and the orchestras and all that, the pits for the plays and that kind of stuff. They need enough athletes to fill all the teams. They need enough history majors to keep the history department happy and enough engineers and nurses and all that stuff. They need enough people that actually pay some bills, so they bring in some tuition dollars. They need enough kids that will fill the right dorms with the right, they need a good balance of male to female, whatever that might mean for that particular school. They need all kinds of things. And that challenge of how do we build this class that will meet all those challenges. And then I think one of the tools that they use to fill the various buckets that they're struggling with is merit money. In other words, let's find a strong student that's also a history major and play soccer. That would be great if we could find that student. And that student might win a lot of merit money because he has that unique combination and never know that that's why that student got more merit money. They might think it was his good grades, but there might have been lots of kids with good grades that could have beat him out on that category. But in addition to good grades, he checked a couple more boxes as they're trying to fill up the class. So that being said, when you're working with families, coming in, let's say they've got parents of a sophomore or junior who are saying, this college thing's really confusing, Todd. We've seen what has gone on with my brother-in-law or sister. Their kids did all kinds of crazy stuff. And I hear that, this kid went for free. We saw it, that when they graduated. How's it going to work for us, or what should we be doing in order to make this work? And let's, and again, that's a pretty broad thing, but let's focus it on just merit aid. If you're saying, I'd like to get merit aid, that sounds good to me. What can families do to make that happen, or what should you do early on?
That's a great question. And I find there are too many families who scramble near the end of this process, perhaps even the summer before their student enrolls in college, to say, where can my son or daughter go find the $500 or $1,000 scholarships here and there? And yes, those are out there, but they're very few and far between in my mind. I find that when I can speak to a student who's a sophomore or junior in high school before they've really created a list, it's a great way to teach them how the system works and how to align themselves with schools that offer large scholarships, and then teach them how to line themselves up to obtain those. And that may mean eliminating some schools from their list that where the student is simply not going to be in the top of the heap, because most of these merit awards do tend to go towards students who are in the top quartile or top third of the admission pool. And yes, there are always outliers, but that's really the focus of where the money goes.
Correct. Yeah, so I guess what I just heard is what you need to do early on then is make sure that you're in the top of the heap for whatever college you're thinking you might want to apply to. And I think you and I have run into a lot of, what's the right word? There's kind of a push-pull problem that happens there, which is a lot of times parents say things like, well, we want to go to the best school our kid can get into. And then when we talk about merit money, so I always use this example, right? If you have a kid that can just barely squeak their way into Notre Dame, which is a pretty competitive school, but it's not the top, it's not Harvard, but it's very competitive. And, that student might be able to get a decent merit award at a school like Marquette or Loyola or Northeastern or whatever. And then they also might be in the running for a full ride at lots of little schools that people have never heard of because they're a strong student. They're not quite the academic rock star, but they're really, really strong if you can get into Notre Dame. Now, the challenge is if you can just squeak into Notre Dame, you say, well, I'd like some merit money. They're going to say, well, wait a minute. You should be happy we accepted you. We're not even entertaining merit aid.
Right.
Whereas that same student is the top of the heap at some other schools, like a Marquette or something like that, where they are in the running for their top merit awards, their top automatic merit awards. And then there are those, again, a lot of colleges will have that presidential scholar or whatever title they give them, where 3 or 4 kids can go for free. But that's, got to be the top 3 or 4 then. And again, students can be there, but it's not the same type of college typically that they can go to. So where do you feel parents, when you start talking about that, do you get a lot of pushback of, well, but I want to go to a good school as far as what's going on there?
Yes. And I find that many parents, especially, are not necessarily aware of all of the opportunities that exist simply because they've only been exposed to the schools in their neighborhood or within 250 miles from their home, or perhaps names that they went to as kids. And so they may not be aware of what else is out there. So I feel like it's my job to educate them on the opportunities and really get a true sense of why they're coming to me for answers to their questions, which if they're coming to me saying we are looking for help and guidance to find schools that are fitting this budget, perfect fit. Those are the people that are willing, they're open-minded, they're looking for schools that are all going to have great academics and the right price at the end. Whereas I get some families who come in with preconceived notions about certain schools, and a particular school in the year 1995 or 2005 may have had a certain reputation, which is completely different from today's version of that same school, it helps to educate the families on how things have changed so dramatically. And I think that when they're willing to listen, they can discover some amazing financial and academic opportunities for their students to really consider. And, that opens up a whole new world for them. And that's where you can find the success of matching the budget with the academics. And I think you have to do it in that fashion these days because college is so expensive. It's really not feasible for most families to tell their student to get into the best school they can. Well, first of all, who's categorizing best? Is it a magazine that publishes once a year, a list of schools, or is it what school is the best fit for your student? And, once you get into that school, then we'll figure out how to pay for it. That is a recipe for disaster.
Right, exactly. So you just mentioned budget. Can you give me some examples of what a budget might look like?
Sure. For me, I work with families like I did when I worked in a financial aid office years ago. And that is, I've worked with enough CPAs. I'm not a CPA myself, but I know how to read tax forms and have the ability to talk to families about the way a college will view their buckets of money differently than another college, perhaps. But what I try to educate them on is this is what the numbers are coming out as from the college's perspective. They assume you can pay this on an annual basis per child per year, when most families, their jaws hit the floor when they see those numbers. That's ridiculous. I can't possibly do that. And I coach them to the effect that most college financial aid formulas are set up to ask families to use cash flow, savings, and borrowing to fund their child's education. And their expectation is you're going to borrow over a 10-year period. So they're not asking you to write a check today out of your pocket for that money, but rather to finance it, leverage yourself over 10 years to pay for college. Probably a lot like a mortgage. When you buy a house, you put a down payment and then you finance it over 30 years. And college is not unsimilar to that if you look at it from the way the formulas are built by the federal government and the schools themselves. But what I think scares a lot of families is this big number they see. I can't figure out how to manipulate my funds to get there. Well, what can you do? Let's take a look at your cash flow. Let's take a look at what you are spending. Do you have new cars every 3 years? Do you have 2 houses? Do you have a rental property? Do you have a small business? What are some of the factors going on in your life that affect your monthly and annual budget? And once we can help them figure out what they actually have, we can then create a budget for them that says you have this set aside in savings, you have this cash flow, which is actually going to increase when your student goes off to college a little bit because you won't be paying for sports anymore. You won't be paying for food. You may not be paying for gas anymore. Yeah, you might still be paying for their cell phone bill, but you could ask them to pay for that. But there's little bits of money that come back into the fold, and that increases the cash flow. And then the final question is, what do you want to borrow? What's your limitation there? What do you have for cash flow to service the debt? You can't just say, I want to borrow this without knowing how you're going to pay it back. And so that really helps reassure families from my conversations with them on this is affordable. We do have the budget, and here's what it is. So when they have a number, they can then go tell their son or daughter to go look at colleges that fit that number. And that's really, I think, where the heavy workload comes in, because that's where you have to match up the schools that give merit money to the budget that the family has.
Right. So what kind of numbers do you typically see as far as college budgets are? I mean, I think what I've seen is, it's many times if you're in the upper middle income, right? You got 2 teachers or 1 lawyer or whatever it might be, and you're earning $125, $150. The state schools aren't going to offer you a lot of need-based aid. They are starting to offer you some merit aid, especially out of state. So realistic budgets might be $20,000 to $30,000 a year, from the parents. Maybe a little bit less depending on your state, right? I think there's a wide variation in state as well.
Right.
I'm in Wisconsin. Our flagship is $32,000. I think you're in the East Coast, Northeast, yes. Right?
I'm in Massachusetts, and we're approaching $40,000 a year. It's about
right.
38,000
exactly.
all in. So it does depend on the school, depends on the state and what the benefits are. And as you're aware, most states are woefully underfunding their state education programs. It's just a challenge for them to help keep the costs low for in-state students. And that creates some challenges for people.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
that's also where I think you can make some interesting discoveries in this day and age. I've had some families with multiple kids in college at the same time, and it turns out, because of the changes to the federal formula a few years ago that no longer give discounts to multiple kids in college at the same time, it might be smarter to have those 2 or 3 children look at schools that are higher sticker prices, but use the institutional formula and perhaps give so much more scholarship money and grant money that those more expensive private schools end up being, on net cost, a lower cost than their own state school would have been, simply because of the way the formulas work and the system works. So, that's the fun part to me anyway, that's the fun part of matching people up with their schools and their budgets and their outcomes, to say, look, there are ways you can make this affordable for your numbers. You just have to be willing to look around a little bit.
Yes, exactly. And I think that's so. As you're working with families, how much time and effort do they put into trying to figure this out? As far as, are they going to visit more schools if you're going to do some merit aid strategies? Are you going to, how do you actually, what does this look like when you're actually doing it?
It's a great question. Well, I get some families who come to me with a list of schools they're already considering, and I can usually save them money if they haven't visited those schools by saying, based on the information we have about your student and your numbers, these schools aren't going to give you anything, and they're going to end up being $90,000 a year if your student even gets in. So let's peel those off the list.
Right.
When you have that upfront conversation to explain how the system works, some families get it and they will remove them. Some will say, well, okay, I understand. We still want to take a shot at it. And that's okay. But just know, if your budget is $40,000 a year and they come back at $70,000 a year, you have to say no. Can you do that?
Yes.
And
I think that's
not always what they want to do.
Right. Absolutely. And I think that's an important family dynamic. Of some parents can say something along the lines of, you can apply wherever you want, but the price needs to be reasonable before we're going to say yes.
Yes.
And some parents say it's not going to work. Once they fall in love with something, that, we have no choice. We have to take the high price ones off the list. We can't walk on the Porsche dealership, because if we like the car, then we're going to be stuck. So we better not even go there, even though we might, things might work out unusual, right? I mean, again, that's the other thing that when I'm talking with families, is we don't have 100% precision. We have, this is likely and that's likely and this is likely. And what we want to do is have enough schools on the list that are likely to be a good price. If we miss on one, we didn't put all our eggs in that one basket. So there's some alternatives there. And I think one of the things that you talk about, kind of alluded to, is when the list says they're all likely to be expensive, maybe you want to change the list, or at least add to the list and put some on there that are likely to be less expensive. All right. So then if we're, focusing on some of this merit aid, as we move further into the system, how do we know which schools are going to give us merit aid and which ones aren't? And, how do we predict merit aid?
Right. That's the age-old question right there. As many people may be aware, I'll say that I have a database that I've been keeping for over 30 years that helps me to track who's going to give money and who doesn't. So when people work with an independent counselor, they may have some advantage there with ease of use and ease of research. But if they're planning to do this on their own, they may have software available at their high school. They may have some opportunities to do some research on what various colleges might offer. I think the first place to look is on a financial aid webpage of a school that your student is considering, and type in merit scholarship and see what they offer. One school that I always point out as a very clear message to families, is having a very clear message to families, is Miami of Ohio. Miami University of Ohio.
Right.
Don't want to mix that up with the one in Florida. Miami of Ohio has a scholarship page that is very clear about, here's the GPA you need, here's the money you get. In-state, out-of-state. It's fabulous. It's very straightforward. There are other schools that hide everything they possibly can because they don't want you to know, because they want to try to manipulate the numbers to build their class accordingly. And there are other schools that may say on their website, financial aid, that we don't give merit scholarship. we only give need-based aid. So if you don't have financial need, according to their formulas, there won't be any discounts. It's
Correct.
going to be pretty
Yeah.
much a full pay or pretty close to it. So, that's part of the research, is to do some digging there. I find that when I also use tools like the National Center for Education Statistics or the college scorecard, or some of the material that colleges will print out, a common data set perhaps for a particular college, they may print out what an average financial aid award is. But I try to remind people that's their average. There's sometimes people get more, sometimes they get less. Which one will your student get? We don't really know until the end game, perhaps. I have also discovered that net price calculators on college websites are getting better. There's still some really terrible ones out there, but there are some schools that have done a nice job. In fact, another school I would call out is Brandeis University in Waltham, Massachusetts. They've completely revamped their financial aid calculator to be AI driven. It takes about 20 to 25 minutes to fill it out, but it's very good. It's very clear. It gives a family a good sense of what they might expect to receive at that particular school based on their students' academics. You plug in some academic information along with the family's finances, and you get some good information on what a scholarship might look like there.
Okay. Yeah. So I think that's important to realize, that a net price calculator is generally designed to figure out if you qualify for need-based aid.
Generally, yes.
Right. Some of them will actually ask about your grades and your academics, and therefore also figure out if you qualify for some sort of merit award in addition to the need-based aid, but many of them don't, right? So, I mean, the net price calculators are anywhere from, this works exactly like what's available in the financial aid office, and if you do the inputs right, which is another challenge, I think, for a lot of families, but
yes,
if you do the inputs perfect, you'll get the exact same answer that the financial aid office will get, and it works really, really well. On the flip side, there's a whole bunch of them that are just god awful, and you have to do enough of them or be familiar with them enough to realize when you're up against something that's almost a waste of time. I mean, I've seen net price calculators say things like, "What is your income in 2015?" It's like, oh, there's a net price calculator that hasn't been updated for 10 years. It's 10 years old. I mean, the government said you have to put one on your website. The government didn't say it has to work well. They didn't say, all those kinds of things. So every college has one. Some colleges take it much more seriously than others, for sure. And I guess if you're still wondering, what is a net price calculator? Again, it's a tool that the government required colleges to put on their websites that helps families estimate what their net cost would be instead of the list price. And so as you're trying to work through and get families locked in on merit aid, are students having to step it up, or is it more of a, well, this is what we're working with, so this is where we're going to go? In other words, well, you just need to get your test scores higher so that we qualify for more aid. Is that the route people take, or you recommend, or is it more the kind of the other way where, well, this is what the test scores we have, so we just have to find schools that match the test scores?
Boy, well, you've probably heard this answer from other people before, but the quick answer is it depends.
Right.
Every school is going to have a little different way that they might consider opportunities to gift scholarship money. And some of it may still be aligned with a certain test score. Some of it may be focused on geography. If you have a student from Vermont applying to Vanderbilt in Tennessee, they rarely get applicants from Vermont. So there might be some opportunities for something there. Not that Vanderbilt's a bad choice because maybe they don't have the scholarships that are doled out that way. But my point is, if you find some colleges that are outside of perhaps the geographic comfort zone and they offer scholarships, there may be significant opportunities to find money that way. And again, the old adage, it depends, really boils down to how the school is building their class each year. I think that's one of the key factors that people need to remember is this isn't personal. It's not about your student. It's about how the college is trying to build a class this year. And if your student fits what they're looking for, God bless you. That's when you get the money, and that's when you get the opportunities, right?
Okay. So any final thoughts or words of wisdom as we kind of wrap things up here on the merit aid front?
I would say merit aid should be looked at as your coupons, your automatic discounts. Where can you get the biggest discounts for your student? And it's something that should really be worked on prior to senior year of high school, by all means, hopefully middle of junior, if not even earlier, sophomore year. Again, you're looking for places where your student has the numbers, the opportunities, the ability to be a highly valued candidate for admission at these schools. Not just the schools your student wants, but also focus on the schools that want your student. That's where the merit money comes into play.
Right. Yes. It takes two parties at that dance to make it work. They have to want you and you have to be willing to go there. And
Yes.
finding that intersection of these are the colleges I'm willing to attend, these types of colleges or whatever it might be. And these are the ones that are willing to offer me merit aid. That, you think of those two circles, somewhere in the middle there's a couple that meet both criteria. For a lot of families. So if people want to learn more about the work that you're doing or want to understand it, take a little deeper dive, where can they learn more about you?
They can go to strategiesforcollege.com. We have complimentary consultations for families. We have a free video learning center on there. We have some scholarship funds that we can give out to families through a tuition rewards program. It's a great way to just reach out and discover what opportunities are there. And I think my passion comes from having worked in a financial aid office before, where I saw how little parents actually knew about the nuances of paying for college. And that's why I do what I do. I really am an advocate for educating families on how to take the steps that make their family happy financially and their student happy academically and socially.
All right. Well, that's great. So we will put in the show notes links to your website and other resources. So I appreciate you spending time with us.
Thanks very much, Brad.
Thank you for listening to the Taming the High Cost of College podcast. Now it's time for you to take action. Head to tamingthehighcostofcollege.com for show notes, bonus content, and to leave feedback for Brad. The next step on your college journey starts now.
Brad Baldridge is a registered representative of Cambridge Investment Research and an investment advisor representative of Cambridge Investment Research Advisors, a registered investment advisor. Securities are offered through Cambridge Investment Research Incorporated, a broker-dealer and member of FINRA and SIPC. Brad owns two companies, Baldridge Wealth Management and Baldridge College Solutions. The Baldridge companies are not affiliated with Cambridge Investment Research.